US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order ending many US economic sanctions on Syria.
The European Commission has announced an agreement in principle on a new trade deal with Ukraine, which EU officials describe as more fair and realistic. The fourth edition of the International Conference on Financing for Development opens in the southern Spanish city of Seville, with the US notably absent from the event.
Santos Cerdán, who is the former aide of Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, was detained without bail in a corruption
US President Donald Trump signed an executive order ending many US economic sanctions on Syria on Monday. This follows a promise Trump made to interim Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara in May. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the move was to encourage the country towards peace.
And this is in an effort to promote and support the country's path to stability and peace. The order will remove sanctions on Syria while maintaining sanctions on the former President Assad, his associates, human rights abusers, drug traffickers, persons linked to chemical weapons activities, ISIS and their affiliates, and Iranian proxies.
Another US government official said the move is aimed at ending Syria's financial isolation and attracting investment from the region as well as the US.
The European Commission has announced an agreement in principle on a new trade deal with Ukraine. The new agreement replaces the existing temporary post-war framework with a long-term, more modest arrangement. Since 2022, trade between the EU and Ukraine was governed by the Autonomous Trade Measures, or the ATM. They eliminated all tariffs and quotas on Ukrainian agricultural exports to Brussels, offering crucial access to European markets during wartime. The new agreement, however, is less ambitious than the scheme it replaces, which expired earlier this month. The EU's Agriculture Commissioner Christoph Hansen says that it aims to strike the right balance between supporting Kyiv's trade with the bloc while addressing the sensitivities of a number of EU agriculture sectors and related concerns. The ATM has sparked outrage in a number of European countries, particularly France and Poland, as farmers protested the spike in Ukrainian imports. Some of the new key provisions of the deal include greater protection of EU markets, specifically for sensitive products like eggs, sugar, and wheat. Ukraine has also agreed to gradually align its production standards, including animal welfare and the use of pesticides, with those of the EU by 2028. Both sides are now set to work on finalizing technical aspects of the deal. The Commission will then present it to member states and the European Parliament in the coming days. Lithuania and the Philippines have signed an agreement on Monday to build a security alliance. The agreement comes as both countries mutually expressed alarm over growing aggression threatening their regions by countries like China. The Memorandum of Understanding was signed in the Philippines' capital Manila between Defense Ministers Dovila Chacaliana and Gilberto Teodoro Jr. The pact aims to foster cooperation between the two nations, particularly in the fields of cybersecurity and defense industries. It also covers other areas including the production of munitions and maritime security. Lithuania's Chacaliana described Vilnius's concern over growing, quote, authoritarian axis of Russia, which includes China, North Korea, and Iran. For years, multiple Asian countries, including the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Brunei, have been involved in prolonged territorial standoffs with China. Beijing has regularly used water cannons and dangerous maneuvers against Filipino vessels and fishermen, accusing them of encroaching in what it calls ancient Chinese territory. Chacaliana condemned the hostilities in the South China Sea, a key global trade route, calling it an attack on the democratic world. The agreement with Lithuania was part of Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos's effort to intensify security alliances between Asia and Western countries. Manila also has a treaty alliance with the United States to boost its maritime defenses. Representatives of many countries descended on Seville on Monday for a high-level conference. The four-day conference, co-hosted by the United Nations and Spain, aims to tackle the growing gap between rich and poor nations and drum up funding for developing countries. A notable absentee in the fourth edition of this conference was the United States, which in previous editions of the event was a major contributor. Washington pulled its participation at the last minute as it rejected the outcome document of a preparatory meeting held on June 17th. The document had been negotiated for months by the UN's 193 member countries. U.S. diplomat Jonathan Schreier noted that Washington's commitment to international cooperation remained steadfast, but said the text crossed many of the U.S.'s red flags. Undeterred, UN Undersecretary General Li Junhua expressed optimism that the conference can still deliver success. The Chinese diplomat who oversees the UN's Economic and Social Affairs program said the participants of the conference, through unity, can build on the momentum of previous editions.
Santos Cerdán, who is the former aide of Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, was detained without bail on Monday. He is being investigated along with the former Transport Minister José Luis Ábalos and his aide Goldo Garcia for receiving money for awarding public contracts. It comes as part of a corruption inquiry that could derail Sanchez's minority government. Cerdán's case is the latest and arguably the most serious in a series of scandals. The Prime Minister issued a public apology earlier this month when Cerdán resigned from office. He did so in order to deflect calls from his political opponents for a snap election. Cerdán has denied the allegations. Both the Hungarian government and the opposition are trying to interpret Saturday's Budapest Pride march, which was attended by an unprecedented crowd, in their own interests. According to Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the event was not a spontaneous civic initiative, but instead was ordered by Brussels and carried out by quote-unquote their puppet politicians. Although more than 100,000 people took part in the march despite a ban imposed by the government, pro-government press is claiming it as a success for the Prime Minister. They believe that the opposition has aligned itself with Pride and claim polls indicate the majority in Hungary is opposed to this. An analyst at Research Institute Political Capital, however, believes the mass demonstration created an awkward political situation for Orbán's party, Fidesz.
Ugye a Fidesz idézte elő azt, hogy ez a téma ennyire fontossá vált, ők dobták be azt az ötletet, vagy azt a törvényt, ami be akarta tiltani a Pride-ot, ehhez képest a Pride megvalósult, és egy soha addig nem látott méretű embertömeg vett rajta részt, kifejezve a szolidaritását nem csak az LMBTQ közösséggel, de kifejezve az ellenérzését, vagy az ellenzék ellenérzését azzal kapcsolatban, hogy a Fidesz be akar tiltani egy rendezvényt. Úgyhogy ez a Fidesz állította ezt a csapdát, és saját maga esett bele ebbe a csapdába.
By managing to mobilize such a huge crowd, Orbán rendered himself as the king of pride in Europe. That is what Peter Magyar, leader of the TISA party, said. And according to Budapest's mayor, Hungary revealed a different side this weekend, one of a country of solidarity, freedom, and Europe.
The battle to reach Europe's 2040 climate targets has begun. On Wednesday, the European Commission is due to present its proposal for a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions to take the bloc towards carbon neutrality by 2050. France led an initial offensive at last week's European summit, setting out its framework.
Je suis favorable à avoir ces objectifs en 2040. Mais j'ai dit, au fond, des choses toutes bêtes. Première chose, si on veut ces objectifs en 2040, il faut nous donner les moyens de le faire et de les rendre compatibles avec notre compétitivité. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Neutralité technologique, flexibilité, investissement.
The word flexibility has appeared repeatedly in the context of climate targets for the European Union. The Commission hopes this will bring Europe's capitals on side.
We need some clear orientation around 2040 and the reduction of 90% of our emissions by 2040 is a clear goal. Then how we can combine the different pieces, the eventual flexibilities, is the thing to be discussed. But we're working hard and we will table our proposal in the coming days.
For environmental NGOs, Granting flexibility is precisely what could end up jeopardizing European efforts to battle climate change.
The one that everyone talks about here in Brussels is about international credits. So this is basically the fact that the EU and member states could pay other countries outside the EU to basically cut their greenhouse gas emission. And then this will be included in the 90% of cut of greenhouse gas emission beyond, within the EU borders. That's a very big issue because this will divert investments for industry or for people, municipalities outside the EU, and this will be more expensive and will have less positive impact on the people and on industry in the EU.
Paris is asking for more time to negotiate and should be able to count on the support of Budapest and Warsaw. However, other member states such as Germany, Spain, Finland and Denmark fully support the 90% CO2 reduction target.
Dozens of Israeli settlers set fires, vandalized military vehicles, and attacked soldiers at a military base in the Israeli-occupied West Bank on Sunday night, the military has said. In a response to the violence, the military used stun grenades against the settlers. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, vowed to eradicate violence, quote-unquote, from the root. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned Sunday's attack, and far-right security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has also offered a condemnation, a rare move as he has often defended Jewish settlers accused of similar crimes. Violence by extremist settlers has risen alongside growing tensions in the region. On Wednesday, 3 Palestinians were killed when Israeli settlers stormed a village near Ramallah. The West Bank is home to some 3 million Palestinians living under seemingly open-ended Israeli military rule and 500,000 Jewish settlers.